Okay. Cool. Welcome back. I think we have everyone still. Are there any questions on that exercise? Would anyone like to quickly go over their general approach?
Yeah, I can go over the approach real quick. Let me see if I can share my screen.
You should be able to now.
Yeah. I think this should be visible, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the only code that was added, which is just in here.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes in here, and basically this is returning rows, and every row corresponds to one row here, right? So every object, so if you like log printed this, it would say, you know, it'd have an object that had a name, Apple, and then a list of costs, right? And then right here, after this select, what you're doing is you're creating every single cell, and every single cell in there needs well, we're going to need 4 cells because every row has 4 columns. So there's going to be, you know, there's going to be 4 results here. And then in those results, we basically say, like, I mean, you can look up, this is exactly the same as the top. So, but yeah, basically you're just saying, how do I get Apple out of this object? And you just do d.name. How do I get the min of these costs? d3.min, d.cost list. How do I get the average of this list? d3.mean, d3.max.
Yep, perfect. That looks good. And it looks like there is, I was looking for the D3 average function earlier, and it's mean, so that's good to know if they have that. Great, so I'll share my screen again. And we're gonna move on to the second example, continuing this product list. Except here we have these 2 buttons where you can sort by the product name and sort by the min cost. And we have our data, and we see the same selection as above. The only difference here is that this is now pulled out into a variable where draw table is a function. So we can have called it already here. And the first thing, apart from that, we have added this click handler onto this button. So let me actually open this up. You can see at the very beginning, there are these 2 buttons. So the first one has an ID of sort by product, and the second one has an ID of sort min cost. So we are grabbing that sort product button. We're saying when a user clicks it, perform this operation. So this whole highlighted section is the function. In this case, we it's sort of hard coded, so we don't even bother grabbing the event. But in here, we're going to sort our data. Sorting again takes a function as input. This is your compare function, like all of the classic sorting algorithms. You at some point are going to compare element A with element B, and if element A is greater than element B, in this case we return 1. You're going to sort them in a certain way. If it's opposite, then it's -1, and then sort of just by convention, if they're the same, you can return 0. And to be honest, in terms of which way this is sorted, ascending versus descending, I generally just kind of guess at one of them, and if it's not wrong, I just switch the 1 and the -1. But after this gets sorted, then we draw a table again, which is still looking at this same produce list array, but this array has now been sorted. So if we go here, right now the list is sorted as banana, apple, celery. We click that, we get apple, banana, celery. Any questions on that general flow of sorting based on an attribute in your column?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Might be kind of stupid though. So in the previous example, I was able to calculate the min cost, the average cost, and the max cost, but I don't see anywhere in this bit of code that it gives it the labels product, min cost, average cost, and max cost, only where I calculated the numbers and the d.name. Was that added previously?
I'm not sure I understand your question, to be honest.
So if you look at the table, it actually has a label, that top line. Yeah, where you see like product.
Yes. Yes. So that is pre-populated, so that you can imagine that as just being in your .html file.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was thinking I didn't add that.
Yep. That's where that is coming from in these examples. Cool. We're gonna do a similar. Yeah, go ahead.
So here, I guess, okay, so let me make sure I understand this. So what's going on is that, so the first thing that happens on click is you're basically just sorting produce list. You're just sorting the underlying data, and then you're just calling read draw table again and drawing every single row again, basically, right?
Yep, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and it's a like, since you're using D3, it doesn't actually reconstruct that whole DOM, right? Because we're doing this data binding and selection. So it doesn't have to like delete an entire cell object and recreate it. It ultimately is just gonna change the text attributes of them, or not really the text attribute, but the text value within each cell. Cool. So we're going to do another exercise. It's going to be a similar thing, but we want to have this sort by min cost button to have, when you click it, to sort the entire table so that, you know, it's ascending. So it'd be banana, celery, apple, zebra, based on the cost of these things. And was the 5 minutes last time too much or too little, or about right?
It was about right.
Cool. Let's do this again.
This one was easier. We should do more of these. This is what the homework should be like.
Cool. We should have everyone back now. Does anyone want to take a minute or two to go over their explanation?
I can go over mine. Can I share screen? Yes, I can. So the first thing I had to do was edit this because I didn't know what the title was here. So when I found this sort by min cost, I was able to find that this is the title for it, or the ID, I mean. So I took the ID element and copied the exact same thing here as was written for the product.
What's this?
So that it would be, where'd it go? There it is. So I put it into, so it would D3 select that one and kept it as an on-clicked. All I had to do was change then the product name, which is what it was here, just .name to .min cost, which I found from right here. So put the min cost in there instead, and then I've got the min cost. If A is greater than B min cost, return 1. If A min cost is less than B min cost, return -1, and then return 0, and it works. So I can sort by the product, and it messes up these, and I can sort by this, and it'll sort it correctly.
Perfect. That's exactly right. Out of curiosity, I forgot to mention this before we switched to big breakout rooms, but there was a comment for like a if time, try this more abstract function. Did anyone attempt to do that? Cool. That's okay. I forgot to mention it, but
Time? You said it was if time was the function?
yeah, the way I labeled this in the comments was to do if time. So I clearly didn't communicate this very well, but the idea here, instead of maybe let me share my screen. Yep, and I've copied this in basically exactly as you said. But you may notice that this whole chunk of code is really very similar to this whole chunk of code, with the the exception of the key and the which attribute you're grabbing. So you can abstract this out a little bit, such that you could sort by sort of like any attribute in a way that makes this a bit easier. And yeah, if we have time, I want to get to exercise 3, but we can come back to how you could potentially do that. But exercise 3 is important because it gets into filtering. And one confusion that I've seen in the past is there are arrays in JavaScript and there are D3 selection objects, and both of these have a member function called filter, and they work there's basically the same idea, but they work a little bit differently. So it's important to keep in mind that these are like 2 different functions with slightly different behavior, not get caught up on it. And today for exercise 3, we're going to look at the D3 selection filter function specifically. Okay, I'm trying out for a tongue twister audition. But here we have the same table again. And in this case, we have these 2, again, hard-coded examples. If I select this button titled highlight cells with value less than 5, you should see the cells with a value of less than 5 become bold. And this other function is the one that you're going to do for the exercise. So the general pattern for this again follows. We have our draw table function, and we have our button, this highlight cell, and when we click it, this actually becomes relatively easy to do because cell select, if we see up here, is this D3 selection object, right? And the selection object contains, all of these cells. And right up here, we are setting the text on those, but we don't set any style. And if we wanted to style just these ones to be bold, one way that you can do this is to filter this selection based on some criteria, and you pass in this criteria as a function. So when we call .filter and pass in this function, it takes this data element, and it's expecting this function to take in this data element and return a Boolean. And when this Boolean evaluates to true, we're going to say keep this element in our new selection. Otherwise, we're going to filter it out. So after we call this filter function, it is again going to return a D3 selection, but it's going to contain a D3 selection that only contains the elements that match our criteria, in this case of a value less than 5. And once you have that, it's pretty trivial to style those differently than the others because you just style those. Any questions on how this works?
Yeah, how do you select things that are in the same row?
That are in the same row. So you're kind of jumping ahead to the exercise where instead of filtering out individual cells, you want to match based on a criteria and then update the whole row, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
will it unhighlight the other ones by chance?
yeah. So the way that I specified here, we're going to add this click handler to this button, which you can see has again this ID. And instead of setting the font weight style, just so there isn't this clash in CSS attributes, we're going to set the background color. So that kind of gets at one of the things that you're saying, where we're going to choose different styles to highlight a cell versus highlight a row. And just to make it simple, we're going to set the background color. And I would recommend following a similar pattern here, where it's going to be on click, and you're going to have a selection that you filter. The other thing that kind of gets at what you asked is the filter. I would say you no longer want to use the cell selection filter. Since you're doing it on every row, right? You're going to want to use the row select filter. Any questions before we jump into breakout rooms?
You're on mute if you don't realize it.
Ah, yes, thank you. Another rollback. Does someone want to share their solution? In the last few minutes here.
I can do mine again, but I've already spoken.
Yeah, I could do it too. It's fine.
You go, Troy.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can you guys see this? I'll probably zoom in.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, so just like the last one, we pretty much took the same structure as highlight cell and instead changed this to highlight row. And then instead of using cell selects, we'll use row select. And since we're interested in max cost, we want to specify that here. And I'm not sure which one was right because here it says value less than 5 and the button says greater than 5. But I'll just show you that I did less than 5 to highlight the row.
Yep.
And you just have to change the style to, there should be background color, and then you can specify color here. So when I click this button here, it highlighted the max cost less than 5.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
And
Nice.
if you did greater than 5, I guess these ones would be orange instead.
Yeah.
I have a question on observable. Is there a way to reset the table without like refreshing your entire page?
I don't think so. I would like if I want to reset it, I refresh the page. There
Gotcha.
might be a way, but
Not that you
no.
know of. Right.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if it
Beyond-
was like a rerun, like where it says like edit, add comment or something.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you bold everything and then you highlight, it's like they're both bolded and highlighted, and it's kind of, or like if you change different like less than to greater than, then everything would be bolded at that point. So
Right.
Can you make the button, you click it a second time, it clears it?
Yeah, so that's a good point. If instead of this being this sort of hard-coded filter, but instead something that changed each time, you could still do this to like set your filter, but you could either prior to that select everything and then like do some reset of the style, or you could have like essentially an opposite filter, a filter on the opposite of your criteria, and then obviously style the things not in your filter in this way. Does that make sense?
Would you just class it and then just do a quick check on the class if it's highlighted? And
yeah, like in practice, I instead of having a long chain of styles, I would prefer to have like a class for like in filter, whatever you want to
Right.
call it, filter true, and then that's nice because whenever you want to change that, you can just change that one CSS class. Is that what you're asking, or is that totally
yeah,
different?
exactly. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, and in practice, I like doing this for much more complicated things, but just for these simple examples, I prefer to keep it simple.
Devin. When you have two different statements in the onClick event, is essentially what's happening is the function starts when you click it the first time, and it's not done till you click it the second time, and then the function just restarts each time.
So
Really?
it sounds like you're asking what happens if you spam the click button and potentially the operation is in the middle of a function call.
Yeah, like you're in between that first cell select and then the second one.
I believe that so we can confirm this in a second, but I believe what happened is your screen is actually blocked until this is done executing, so you can't queue you can't trigger an event in the middle of that. I
Okay,
could be
that
wrong
makes
though.
sense. So like the function is not complete at that point. and you need to complete it for it to execute other code.
Yes, because well, in general, when you run JavaScript, there's kind of a flow of things that happen on the browser side of things, and that flow includes like waiting until your JavaScript is done. After it is done executing, updating, looking at what changes have happened to the DOM, and then recalculating the layouts and re-rendering the things that appear on your screen. And yeah, I'll have to double check this, but I can get back to you on whether these callback functions are blocking or not. I'd have to double check. And we are technically at time, so if any of you have to go, you're obviously welcome to go. Earlier, we were looking at this sorting function. So I just want to show an idea of what I kind of meant by that. So one thing you can do is create a higher level function. Instead of hard coding this attribute, you can make a function that's called, say, get compare function, and you pass in an attribute name. And then now that we have a variable, we can use this square bracket syntax to get that attribute from these objects A and B, you know, as long as they exist. Otherwise, this is gonna return undefined and like fail to sort, basically. But now that we have this get compare function, we can call this get compare function with the attribute that we want in this case, which is name. This will then return this function, looking at the attribute name. And in this case, get compare function mid cost will return a different function that's looking at the min cost, obviously. Does that make sense?
That indeed does.
Yep.
Hey, why do
Cool.
you have to have to return 0?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is this the
I'm
kind
not
of
sure.
zero that compares the first one to the second one, then it compares the second one to the third one, and then it compares whatever one's lower out of those two back to the first one? The like slowest sort function.
Thought it's just because like if it's not less than, it's not greater than, then it's equal to, and then if they're both 0, then one's not bigger than the other, so it's gonna throw it wherever, I guess.
Yeah, I suspect it's more of this sort of semantic desire than, you know, you probably won't see any or much functional difference if you know, get rid of this if statement entirely and always return either 1 or -1. But it, you know, it might do some extra work if you have a bunch of duplicates, or might, you know, it might do something a little bit different. But I would suspect it's still gonna give you a sorted list. Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
actually, this one won't have a tie because this says greater than right now. So this one you don't have to worry about the return 0, because if it's equal, it's not greater than. So it'll return the -1.
Right.
All
Cool.
right.
Any last questions? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
You too.